On August 2, 1947, Stardust, a British South American Airways (BSAA) Avro Lancastrian airliner on a flight from Buenos Aires, Argentina, to Santiago, Chile, crashed into Mount Tupungato in the Argentine Andes. An extensive search operation failed to locate the wreckage, despite covering the area of the crash site. The fate of the aircraft and its occupants remained unknown for over 50 years, giving rise to various conspiracy theories about its disappearance. In the late 1990s, pieces of wreckage from the missing aircraft began to emerge from the glacial ice. It is now believed that the crew became confused as to their exact location while flying at high altitudes through the, then poorly understood, jet stream. Mistakenly believing they had already cleared the mountain tops, they started their descent when they were in fact still behind cloud-covered peaks. Stardust crashed into Mount Tupungato, killing all aboard and burying itself in snow and ice. The last word in Stardust's final Morse code transmission to Santiago Airport, Stendek, was received by the airport control tower 4 minutes before its planned landing and repeated twice. It has never been satisfactorily explained. The accident aircraft, an Avro 691 Lancastrian III, was built as constructor's number 1280 for the Argentine Ministry of Supply to carry 13 passengers, and first flew on November 27, 1945. Its civil certificate of airworthiness, CAFE, number 7282, was issued on January 1, 1946. It was delivered to BSAA on January 12, 1946, was registered on January 16 as GGWH and given the individual aircraft name, Stardust. Page needed. Stardust carried 6 passengers and a crew of 5 on its final flight. The captain, Reginald Cook, was an experienced former Royal Air Force pilot with combat experience during the Second World War, as were his first officer, Norman Hilton Cook, and second officer, Donald Shecklin DFC. Cook had been awarded the Distinguished Service Order, DSO, and the Distinguished Flying Cross, DFC. The radio operator, Dennis Harmer, also had a record of wartime as well as civilian service. Iris Evans, who had previously served in the Women's Royal Naval Service, RENS, as the chief petty officer, was the flight attendant. Stardust's last flight was the final leg of BSAA Flight CS-59, which had started in London on an Avro York named Star Mist on July 29, 1947, landing in Buenos Aires on August 1. The passengers were 1 woman and 5 men of Palestinian, Swiss, German and British nationality. One was a British diplomatic courier, a king's messenger. Marta Limpert, a German migrant, was the only passenger known for certain to have initially boarded Star Mist in London before changing aircraft in Buenos Aires to continue on to Santiago with the other passengers. Stardust left Buenos Aires at 1:46 p.m. on August 2. This leg of the flight was apparently uneventful until the radio operator, Harmer, sent a routine message in Morse code to the airport in Santiago at 5:41 p.m., announcing an expected arrival of 5:45 p.m. However, Stardust never arrived, no more radio transmissions were received by the airport, and intensive efforts by both Chilean and Argentine search teams, as well as by other BSAA pilots, failed to uncover any trace of the aircraft or of the people on board. The head of BSAA, Air Vice Marshal Don Bennett, personally directed an unsuccessful 5-day search. A report by an amateur radio operator who claimed to have received a faint SOS signal from Stardust initially raised hopes that there might have been survivors, but all subsequent attempts over the years to find the vanished aircraft failed. In the absence of any hard evidence, numerous theories arose, including rumors of sabotage, compounded by the later disappearance of 2 other aircraft also belonging to BSAA, speculation that Stardust might have been blown up to destroy diplomatic documents being carried by the King's messenger, or even the suggestion that Stardust had been taken or destroyed by a UFO. An idea fueled by unresolved questions about the flight's final Morse code message. In 1998, 2 Argentine mountaineers climbing Mount Tupungato about 60 miles, 100 kilometers, west-southwest of Mendoza, and about 50 miles, 80 kilometers, east of Santiago found the wreckage of a Rolls-Royce Merlin aircraft engine, along with twisted pieces of metal and shreds of clothing, in the Tupungato Glacier at an elevation of 15,000 feet, 4,600 meters. In 2000, an Argentine Army expedition found additional wreckage including a propeller and wheels, one of which had an intact and inflated tire, and noted that the wreckage was well localized, a fact which pointed to a head-on impact with the ground, and which also ruled out a mid-air explosion. Human remains were also recovered, including 3 torsos, a foot in an ankle boot and a manicured hand. By 2002, the bodies of 5 of the 8 British victims had been identified through DNA testing. A recovered propeller showed that the engine had been running at near cruising speed at the time of the impact. Additionally, the condition of the wheels proved that the undercarriage was still retracted, suggesting controlled flight into terrain rather than an attempted emergency landing. During the final portion of Stardust's flight, heavy clouds would have blocked visibility of the ground. It has therefore been suggested that, in the absence of visual sightings of the ground due to the clouds, a navigational error could have been made as the aircraft flew through the jet stream, a phenomenon not well understood in 1947, in which high-altitude winds can blow at high speed in directions different from those of winds observed at ground level. If the airliner, which had to cross the Andes mountain range at 24,000 feet, 7,300 meters, had entered the jet stream zone, which in this area normally blows from the west and southwest, resulting in the aircraft encountering a headwind, this would have significantly decreased the aircraft's ground speed. Mistakenly assuming their ground speed to be faster than it really was, the crew might have deduced that they had already safely crossed the Andes, and so commenced their descent to Santiago, whereas in fact they were still a considerable distance to the east-northeast and were approaching the cloud-enshrouded Tupungato Glacier at high speed. Some BSAA pilots, however, expressed skepticism at this theory, convinced that Cook would not have started his descent without a positive indication that he had crossed the mountains. They have suggested that strong winds may have brought down the craft in some other way. One of the pilots recalled that, "We had all been warned not to enter cloud over the mountains as the turbulence and icing posed too great a threat." A set of events similar to those that doomed Stardust also caused the crash of Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 in 1972, depicted in the film Alive, although there were survivors from that crash because it involved a glancing blow to a mountainside rather than a head-on collision. Stardust is likely to have flown into a nearly vertical snowfield near the top of the glacier, causing an avalanche that buried the wreckage within seconds and concealed it from searchers. As the compressed snow turned to ice, the wreckage would have been incorporated into the body of the glacier, with fragments emerging many years later and much further down the mountain. Between 1998 and 2000, about 10% of the total expected wreckage emerged from the glacier, prompting several re-examinations of the accident. More debris is expected to emerge in future, not only as a result of normal glacial motion, but also as the glacier melts. A 2000 Argentine Air Force investigation cleared Cook of any blame, concluding that the crash had resulted from a heavy snowstorm and very cloudy weather, as a result of which the crew were unable to correct their positioning. The last Morse code message sent by Stardust was ETA Santiago 1745 hours Stendek. The Chilean Air Force radio operator at Santiago Airport described this transmission as coming in loud and clear, but very fast. As he did not recognize the last word, he requested clarification and heard Stendek repeated twice in succession before contact with the aircraft was lost. This word has not been definitively explained and has given rise to much speculation. The staff of the BBC television series Horizon, which presented an episode in 2000 on the Stardust disappearance, received hundreds of messages from viewers proposing explanations of Stendek. These included suggestions that the radio operator, possibly suffering from hypoxia, had scrambled the word descent, of which Stendek is an anagram, that Stendek may have been the initials of some obscure phrase, or that the airport radio operator had misheard the Morse code transmission despite it reportedly having been repeated multiple times. The Horizon staff concluded that, With the possible exception of some misunderstanding based on Morse code, none of these proposed solutions was plausible. The simplest explanation put forward to date is that the spacing of the rapidly sent message was misheard or sloppily sent. In Morse code, determining accurate spacing between characters is vital to properly interpret the message. Stendek uses exactly the same dot/dash sequence as SCTIAR, SCTI being the ICAO four-letter code for Los Cerrillos Airport in Santiago, AR being the Morse abbreviation for over. Alternatively, the Morse spelling for Stendek is one character off from instead spelling VLP, the call sign for the airport at Valparaiso, 110 kilometers north of Santiago.